Hello again. Welcome back to Scouching's 2019 NHL Draft recaps. Today we're going to be looking at the Arizona Coyotes and all of the players that they picked this season. Now, leading the way, the Arizona Coyotes traded up to the 11th overall selection to take Victor Soderstrom. Now, I like Victor Soderstrom, but I feel like this falls into the category of a team wanting a defenseman in the draft and just taking the best one they feel is available at any cost. I like Soderstrom and I like his mobility and his all-around package, but I'm just not really sure where he goes from here, and considering who was available on the board, with names like Cole Caulfield, Alex Newhook, Peyton Krebs, and even Matt Boldy, I really felt that the Arizona Coyotes would add a really nice offensive piece, but in reality they traded up to get a nice defensive one who I'm not sure has the same level of ceiling that these other players might have had. I don't think it's a terrible pick at 11, but it is a big reach, and I think it's a risky one for the Arizona Coyotes, but I do think that Soderstrom could become one of the better defensemen to come out of this draft. The Coyotes didn't pick until the 3rd round, and they went with a prep school player, John Farinacci, a player who was flirting with some first-round rankings early in the year. I saw Farinacci play a little bit as the draft approached, and I came away kind of impressed with his skating ability and overall offensive ability, but I feel like the pace of play at prep school kind of tricked him into getting away with a lot. There might be a little bit of an adjustment period for Farinacci as he grows into his college role, but I do think there are really nice tools there, and in the 3rd round, it's a decent pick for the Arizona Coyotes. I'm interested to see where he goes over the next few years in college, but I do like the player. And then at 98, the Arizona Coyotes got great value with Matias Maccelli. I really came away impressed with Maccelli every single time I watched him play in the USHL this year. Now, there are some rumored personality issues that I have heard about through the grapevine, but those are the kinds of things that you can learn to get over, and the raw talent in Maccelli is really fantastic. He doesn't really have that high gear that a lot of high-octane offensive players have, but he's really creative, he's got a lot of skill to him, and he's a lot of fun to watch. And I think that over the next few years, he could take some time to be patient and develop, and I think the Arizona Coyotes could have themselves an interesting offensive piece here in the future. At 107th, the Arizona Coyotes added themselves to the list of teams taking players off of Loko Yaroslavl, and they went with Alexander Darian. Now, I saw Darian play quite a few times, and he did stick out on quite a few occasions, and I think this is decent value here. Although he is an overage draft pick, so I would expect him to start taking some steps outside of the MHL in the coming years, but this is very much a wait-and-see pick. They drafted on skill and we'll see where it goes. I don't know what the ceiling is with this player, but there were nice flashes. At 151st, the Coyotes took Aku Ratu, who is a player I've seen a little bit and never came away super impressed, but I do see an interesting playmaker here. I'm much more interested in his brother, who is not draft eligible for a few more years, but Aku Ratu is no slouch and we'll see where he goes. I just don't really know what the upside is with this pick. At 174th, though, the Arizona Coyotes really went off the board to me and took a really interesting player that completely slipped through my draft tracking. Daniil Savunov played for Penza in the 2nd Division Russian Pro League and had a pretty good year in terms of production. Now, this is in a weaker conference in the VHL, but he had a higher involvement percentage in team offense than Vasily Podkolzin did, and he did play a lot more minutes, and he did play a lot more games than Podkolzin, but it is kind of interesting to see a player with that type of a profile slip all the way to this area of the draft when Podkolzin was a top 10 pick. Now, I'm not saying they're the same player with the same level of upside or anything, but it is just very interesting that there was a player available in this range of the draft that on paper had some similarities in terms of production as a player that went in the top 10. The VHL is no joke of a league, and to draft a first-time draft eligible in this range of the draft with this kind of production is just a big swing in the dark that I really respect, and I think the Coyotes might have something interesting here if you're a little more patient. Just 2 picks later, the Arizona Coyotes went with Anthony Romano, who was an all-out offensive juggernaut that I saw with Sioux Falls quite a bit. The production didn't necessarily follow the player that I saw on the ice, but he is a tremendously skilled, really fun offensive player. He's going to need to put in some work defensively, but the tools are there for an interesting prospect moving forward for Arizona. And then as the draft wound down, the Arizona Coyotes decided to take a huge swing in the dark on Axel Bergqvist. He's a guy who has his fans out there, and I might consider myself one of them. He's extremely undersized for a defenseman, but he played against men in the Swedish 2nd Division and produced pretty well. He's got an absolute bomb from the point, which is not something you'd expect from someone so small, and he does have nice puck skills, so it's kind of an interesting swing in the dark, and I'm interested to see where he goes with his career. The offensive tools are there, it's just the rest of the package has to round itself out, but he could be an interesting one for Arizona. And then drafting a player that was on some people's first-round lists coming into the season, Valentin Nussbaumer was their last pick in the draft at 207th. This is just a pure value pick. I don't really know how you can complain about this. He fell down the draft tremendously, and on paper there were some red flags, especially with regards to the defensive impacts that he had. He was very much an offensive player, but he didn't produce enough to outweigh the defensive consequences of his style of play. It'll be interesting to see if he can round things out a little bit and capture kind of the upside that he had a year ago, but this is a good value pick for the Arizona Coyotes, although I'm not really sure if it'll really work out. But in the 7th round, it's the 7th round. So if you've watched Scouching reports before, we're going to take the same rating system and translate them into these videos. So the number is going to indicate the overall potential that I see in the group of players the team has drafted, and the letter is going to indicate the likelihood of reaching that potential as a whole. And for the Arizona Coyotes, I had a really hard time judging where they are. I'm comfortable giving them a 2C. I think they're going to come out with some good players in this draft, but I don't think they really knocked it out of the park. There's some interesting value swings that they took later on. Victor Soderstrom is not a bad defenseman. He was just drafted much higher than I would have taken him, and trading up to take him also a little bit questionable, especially when someone like Cam York was still on the board, and Philadelphia traded down and ended up with Cam York anyway. But Farinacci and Michelli and Darian are all really interesting bets, and Bergqvist and Savunov are total shots in the dark, so who knows where those guys end up. I think overall, Arizona had an okay draft with a lot of big swings, but I really wouldn't be surprised if they look back on this draft in a few years and go, well, just feels like there was a little bit of missed upside with a few of their picks, but they did make some nice swings. So that's it for the Arizona Coyotes. Our next subject is going to be the Chicago Blackhawks. If you liked the video, you could click all the buttons you see below me so you never miss another one. If you really liked it, you could support us on Patreon, where you get access to merchandise discounts and spreadsheets for drafted and undrafted prospects, as well as plenty of other goodies. Or you could pick up some merchandise from the Scouchwear shop. All the links are in the description. So that's it for this one, and I hope you join me for the video breaking down the Chicago Blackhawks.